Coming up, the Heat hold off the Celtics and Trae Young helps the Hawks to another big win. This is Locked On Now NBA.
The biggest games, the best performances, expert analysis. You are Locked On Now.
Welcome in. You're listening to Locked On Now NBA, local experts on the biggest stories on the hardwood. I'm your host, Kainani Stevens. Thank you for making Locked On Now your first listen every single weekday. We've got a full slate of NBA games from Wednesday night, and all of our Locked On NBA hosts are here to talk about them. But first, we're going to start off in Boston, where the Heat won in our biggest game.
The biggest game.
The Heat were down on the road in the fourth quarter against probably the hottest team in the NBA right now, but that Heat culture stood up big time and got the win in the final quarter of the game. Locked On Heat tells you how Miami came up together in clutch time to stay at the top of the East.
1 week after the infamous sideline blow-up, and the Miami Heat go into Boston and beat the Celtics 106-98 in a game with a playoff atmosphere. I'm Wes Goldberg of Locked On Heat, and the takeaway from this one is that this is as good as we've seen the Heat starters play all season. 24 points for Jimmy Butler, 23 for Kyle Lowry, 17 points, 12 rebounds, and 8 assists for Bam Adebayo. Eric Spoelstra recently revamped the rotation, putting Max Strus in the starting lineup, and Strus stepped up with 14 points tonight and some big defensive plays, including drawing a huge charge on Jason Tatum late in a back-and-forth fourth quarter. Miami's defense stepped up, holding the Celtics to 15 points in the fourth, and Miami's basketball IQ, perhaps its greatest strength, was on full display. Defensive coverages were sharp. Jimmy Butler was hitting mid-range looks, and Kyle Lowry was finding open threes. And again, after a nightmarish week in which the Heat dropped 4 straight games and were seemingly coming apart, they get a big win. They take a full game lead for the number 1 seed in the East and have momentum heading into the final 5 games before the playoffs begin. For more on tonight's win and the biggest Miami Heat stories, check out Locked On Heat on YouTube or wherever you get podcasts.
The Celtics really didn't have any answers for that tough Miami Heat defense, and they struggled to score, especially in the fourth quarter. Locked On Celtics tells us now if there's anything that we need to worry about after a second straight loss for the C's.
Hey there, John Corrales here from the TD Garden after the Boston Celtics lose at 106-98 to the Miami Heat. A clash for the top seed, and Miami holds on to it. Boston Celtics score only 14 points in the fourth quarter, 15 points in the fourth quarter to really kind of crumble down the stretch. They've been blowing teams out all this time. Maybe they forgot how to win these close games. This is a tough one for the Celtics, where you saw the ball movement kind of stop a little bit too much ISO, and kind of frankly too much complaining to the officials. The officiating was a little rough from the Boston perspective, but the Celtics just kept harping on that. Marcus Smart got ejected at the end of the game when it didn't matter, but still he was so frustrated that it resulted in the ejection. So the Celtics drop one here, and it kind of doesn't bode well for how they're playing without Robert Williams. Daniel Tice did kind of step up, and maybe there's a way for them to kind of capitalize on that. Grant Williams did not. He had one of his worst games of the season, but Tice, 15 points on 6 of 6 shooting, and maybe he could be the guy that they turn to. We'll see what they do in their next game, because that'll be a little bit telling of what Ime Udoka is thinking. For now, the Celtics, and maybe it's not such a bad thing for them, will fall in the standings or stay in that 3rd or 4th seed, and maybe that's where they want to be without Robert Williams. Maybe an easier first-round matchup. He'll be back in 4 to 6 weeks, and so maybe they want him in the second round. We'll figure it all out and talk about it on the Locked On Celtics podcast, so make sure you're subscribed and watch the show on YouTube.
Luka Doncic showed off his passing skills while some other players stepped up big for Dallas in their win over the Cavs. Locked On Mavericks goes over the victory.
Dodo does it again. Dorian Finney-Smith sets a new career high as the Mavs beat the Cavs. Nick Angstead from the Locked On Mavericks podcast here. Dallas Mavericks get the win 120-112 against the Cleveland Cavaliers, who are without Jared Allen, Evan Mobley, obviously Colin Sexton, missing a few other pieces. Spencer Dinwiddie sitting out the second night of a back-to-back for the Mavericks as he's still recovering from the ACL injury from last year. This will be the last back-to-back that the Mavericks will have this year, so he should be back for the rest of the year. But it was Luka that started him off. 11 assists in the first half, 8 in the first quarter. Then Luka had a 17-point third quarter, and he was just absolutely dishing. It was at times in this game, he just felt like he could do whatever he wanted. There was a moment in this game where former Maverick Moses Brown was trying to guard him under the rim. Luka gave him the okie doke with the little fake pass, completely turned it around, hit a little shot over the top of him. It was just stuff like that all night from Luka Doncic. But Dorian Finney-Smith has been absolutely incredible for the Dallas Mavericks. Sets a new career high with 28 points and 6 threes in this game. His development over the last 5 or 6 years has been one of the biggest and most brightest things for this Dallas Mavericks team. He is going to be absolutely crucial in any kind of playoff series the Mavericks face. And now they could possibly move up to 3 if the Golden State Warriors fall to the Phoenix Suns later tonight. We'll talk about that and more on tonight's Locked On Mavs.
The Cavs are down a ton of players. They're limping into the playoffs right now. And this loss for Cleveland puts them that much closer to the play-in tournament at this point. Locked On Cavs takes you through the latest loss and what it means for Cleveland going forward.
Hey there, everyone. Evan Damrell here, co-host of Locked On Cavs, part of the Locked On Podcast Network at Rocket Mortgage Fieldhouse after the Cleveland Cavaliers 120-112 loss to the Dallas Mavericks. With this loss, it seems more and more certain that the Cavaliers are going to be a play-in team in the Eastern Conference and likely host the Brooklyn Nets in the first round. If they win that, they make the playoffs. If they lose that, they win the winner between the Hawks and the Hornets at this point. The standings are a little shaky still. We got to figure out how it ends up. But it's not very surprising. This Cavs team is banged up, and they're seemingly running out of gas just at the end of the season. They're playing Moses Brown serious minutes, so my co-host Chris Manning and I will break this down on tomorrow's episode and kind of talk a little bit more about the standings and also maybe the fact that the Cleveland's dream season may be over now that Evan Mobley's out.
The Magic lost big time to the Wizards, but once again, they had some performances that you could be very happy with from those young names on their roster. Locked On Magic takes you through the box score against the Wizards in Washington.
Do you need me to recap this game? The Orlando Magic lost to the Washington Wizards. That's the thing. You know, it's what they're doing. But really, the story of this game is Franz Wagner is really good at basketball, and Markelle Fultz is really good at basketball. Franz Wagner had another 28-point game, was really good from the field, did a lot of really good things, and the Magic put him on the ball, and that's something that Magic fans have been asking for so long and something they've been wanting to see from him. And if there's really anything left for the Magic to gain out of this season, it's just letting Franz go, letting him be the featured player, making sure he gets the ball and making it a point to get him the ball and letting him just go. This was a game where he did that and he played really well. The same was true for Markelle Fultz, who played season-high 21 points, had 19 points, 7 assists, just doing all the things that we know Markelle Fultz can do, and certainly looking like he will be the starting point guard for the Orlando Magic next season. The Magic were significantly better offensively with Fultz on the floor. But, you know, score-wise, you know, Magic had a lead early, gave it away, weren't really interested in playing defense. 5 more to go. We'll have more on Locked On Magic later on tonight.
Coming up, the Hawks keep on scoring big and winning big. This is Locked On Now NBA. Today's edition of Locked On Now is brought to you by Built Bar, the best tasting protein bars on the market. They're made with 100% real chocolate. They're low in fat, low in calories, and they're high in protein, especially their new puffs that are made with protein-infused marshmallow. They have a ton of different flavors, so you can check out everything. There's always one flavor for someone in your family. And if you head over to Built.com, you can use our promo code LOCKED15 to get 15% off your order. You just got to use promo code LOCKED15 for 15% off your order at Built.com. Welcome back to Locked On Now NBA. I'm Kainani Stevens. Thank you for making Locked On Now your first listen every single weekday. Trae Young put up another 40-point night, this time over Oklahoma City, to give the Hawks a win in our biggest performance.
The best performance.
Hold up.
The Atlanta Hawks scored 40 points in each of the first 2 quarters of their matchup last night. That was going to be too much for the Thunder to come back against. Locked On Hawks tells you more after another big night for Trae Young and the Atlanta offense.
Hello, friends. My name is Brad Rowland, and Atlanta Hawks go to Oklahoma City and dominate the proceedings, leading by double digits for the last 39 minutes of the contest. It was an explosive first half, the best offensive first half in a long, long time for the Hawks. 85 points in the first half, 30 for Trae Young. It was not competitive after that. There were, flickers of life from the Thunder in the second half, but really it was not at all competitive or all that interesting in the second half, which is just what the Hawks wanted it on the first night of a back-to-back as they returned to Atlanta for a game against Cleveland on Thursday. But a productive road trip for the Hawks, 2-0. They were favored in both games by a lot of points, but they went out and took care of business, which is what the Hawks have to do right now. Just win games, stack wins. And with all of that said, a very, very positive night at the office for the Hawks on the road. We'll touch on this and much more on Locked On Hawks podcast.
The Knicks couldn't make it 5 wins in a row against the Hornets last night after letting things slip away in the fourth quarter. Locked On Knicks definitely not happy about some of the decisions down the stretch from their head coach Tom Thibodeau that may have led to the loss.
Hey, what's up, guys? This is Gavin Shaw of the Locked On Knicks podcast following a 125-114 loss for the New York Knicks against the Charlotte Hornets. The most disappointing part of the night for the New York Knicks was not the ending of their 4-game winning streak. It was how it happened. Emmanuel Quickley, who scored 11 points over the first 7 minutes of the fourth quarter, inexplicably subbed out for Evan Fournier down the stretch. Now, I don't mind Fournier being in there. He was in the midst of a 30-point game, but Quickley should have been in there over Alec Burks. At this point in the season, the Knicks are essentially eliminated from playoff contention. And even if your goal, hypothetically, let's just say they were in the playoffs or you're trying to win the game, Emmanuel Quickley has not so debatably been one of the Knicks' top 2 players over the last 2 months alongside RJ Barrett. He has been spectacular. He is 2 games removed from guiding them to a victory over the Miami Heat. He's evolving into, if not a star, certainly a star bench player and certainly an essential stalwart of this Knicks lineup over these last couple of games, over these last 2 months. And yet Tom Thibodeau saw it fit to say, hey, let's just throw the veteran out there. Let's just throw the guy that I perceive to be the better defender out there. Because there isn't an explanation for it. It's Tibbs' insistent on doing what makes him comfortable. And that has been his downfall this season as a Knicks coach. That has been his downfall throughout his entire coaching career. And it's not a mistake that he's learned from this season by any means. And it should cost him his job. It's probably not going to cost him his job. And on a night when the Knicks were pretty horrific defensively, didn't really have good process offensively, and got bailed out by some impressive shot making, this was the cherry on top of a not so fun night for the New York Knicks. I'm Gavin Shaw. I'll talk to you next time on Locked On Knicks.
The Raptors won big at home against the Timberwolves last night, and they continue to climb up those East standings. Locked On Raptors thinks this team is hitting their peak at the perfect time with the playoffs right around the corner.
10 out of 12. Sean Woodley here from Locked On Raptors to break down the Toronto Raptors' 125-102 win over the Minnesota Timberwolves here at Scotiabank Arena on Wednesday night. This win moves the Raptors to 44-32, 2 games clear of the Cleveland Cavaliers for 7th place in the Eastern Conference, and they're tied with the Chicago Bulls. The Bulls do have the tiebreaker, but the Raptors are playing incredible basketball right now, 10 of 12, and they really reached their kind of peak form over the course of this game against the Wolves. It did not start well. It was a 40-22 lead, 23 lead that is, for the Wolves in the early going of the second quarter. The Raptors had nothing going on the offensive end. They forced 10 turnovers in the first quarter and couldn't turn that into anything. They finished this game forcing 22 turnovers. They end up shooting 18 of 36 from 3, and they outscore the Wolves over the final 34 minutes by a score of 102-62. A lot of that's powered by transition. A lot of that powered by some incredible defense. Fred VanVleet had one of his best defensive games of an excellent defensive season that he's already put together. But Pascal Siakam, again, the story for the Raptors here. He's been playing all NBA level basketball. We know he scored 40 points on Monday in a win over Boston in overtime. This night, not so much in the scoring department, just 5 of 15. The Wolves play really aggressive, almost Raptors-like defense with former Raptors assistant coach Chris Finch on the bench over there, and they were giving the Siakam the business. They were really making it difficult on him. He couldn't get to the rim whatsoever, so he just decided to play make. He kicked out. The Raptors, again, hit 18 of 36 threes. Gary Trent Jr. was 6 of 8. OG Anunoby was 4 of 4. The guys off the bench combined to go 7 of 13 as well between Precious Achiuwa, Thad Young, and Chris Boucher. Just an all-encompassing performance for this Raptors team that was running and gunning, banging in threes all night long. This really is the vision that Masai Ujiri and Bobby Webster put together when they crafted a roster made almost exclusively of 6'9" guys. I will have more from this game that is broken down on tomorrow's episode of Locked On Raptors. Be sure to tune in.
The Timberwolves looked great through the first quarter, but things really flipped on them against Toronto later in the game. Our Locked On Wolves host separates why that Minnesota team that came out of the locker room couldn't do it for the final quarters.
Ben Beacon with Locked On Wolves here. The Timberwolves were blown out by the Toronto Raptors on Wednesday by 23 points in a game that Minnesota led by as many as 17 early in the second quarter. But midway through the second frame, things just completely flipped. The Timberwolves had been physical with the Raptors. They were competitive in the paint, on the glass, blocking shots, all that in the first quarter and a half. But it changed midway through the second quarter. On the postgame podcast tonight, we'll talk about what changed, what exactly happened over the course of this game. The Raptors shot 50% on three-point attempts, a team that's traditionally pretty middle of the pack in terms of three-point percentage, doesn't actually shoot that many threes as a team, but they made 18 threes in this game. The Timberwolves made only 11 and shot 29.7% from outside the arc. We'll break down what happened to the Wolves on both ends of the floor, and why they missed Jaden McDaniels so much in this game, who remains out with the sprained ankle. To make matters worse, the Denver Nuggets won on Wednesday. The Timberwolves are now 3 games back of the 6th spot, which is actually now held by the Utah Jazz, as Denver moved ahead of Utah into the 5 spot in the West. The Wolves have Denver on Friday night. We'll talk a little bit about that too. It's all coming on the postgame podcast. Make sure to subscribe to Locked On Wolves for all things Timberwolves.
The Houston Rockets couldn't get it done yesterday, but rookie Jalen Green set a new shooting record as Houston kept it close with the Kings. Locked On Rockets tells you more on Green's night and Houston's narrow defeat.
A game goes down to the wire here in Houston between the Rockets and the Kings. What's up? This is Jackson Gatlin from over at Locked On Rockets. What a game between Sacramento and Houston in this one. The Rockets and Kevin Porter Jr. and Jalen Green were sensational in this game. Jalen Green tying his career high, 32 points. Now the youngest rookie in NBA history to have multiple consecutive games strung together, 4 games specifically of 5 or more made three-pointers. He was electric in this one. Kevin Porter Jr. notching his first career triple-double after having his real first career triple-double wiped away earlier this season. Had 30 points, 12 rebounds, 12 assists, a truly sensational performance. Those two guys combining for 62 of the Rockets' 118 points in this game. Coming up just a little bit short, though, in the final moments against the Sacramento Kings. There was a last-second shot by Josh Christopher to try and tie this one up, force it into overtime. A tough loss to stomach given just how well the Rockets played in this game. We're going to break it all down for you right over at Locked On Rockets. No, they lost. Yeah, it was great. The Tankathon is still alive. It's awesome. Yeah, they didn't need to win that game. Who wants to win a game against the Kings? They need a top pick.
That's it for this edition of Locked On Now NBA. Thank you for making Locked On Now your first listen every single weekday. Make sure you check out Locked On NBA and, of course, your team's Locked On podcast. I'm Kainani Stevens. This has been Locked On Now.